11, with the 11, some patients were remaining. I think just to give clarity is that some of the NGOs never existed before. Therefore, they were just seemingly just put together for the purpose of the marathon project. But some NGOs existed prior, and they had extraordinarily higher numbers than their capacity and against the licensing policy. So some of the NGOs, most definitely 11, remained also with some patients from Life Esidimeni whose families refused relocation. So those that were completely closed are 14.
Can you confirm for us that all of those NGOs that were not licensed were shut down by the Provincial Health Department?
Indeed.
I'd like to take you...
Yes, indeed. Those that were not legally licensed or which were irregularly licensed. Yes.
I'd like to take you now to a document that's labeled ELA 161. I wonder if somebody could help you get to that document.
Yes.
Have you got ELA 161?
Yes, I do.
MEC, this is a document that we received yesterday from the MEC for Finance, Barbara Creasy. And it's a document that reflects payments made to NGOs by the Gauteng Department of Health. And it lists the dates that those payments were made per NGO and the amounts that were paid to them. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
If you could turn, and unfortunately the pages are not numbered, but the lists of the NGO is alphabetical. If you could turn to the listing for Shama House. It's on the 4th page of ELA 161.
Yes. I am there.
Can you confirm, MEC, that almost 3 million rand was transferred by the Gauteng Department of Health to Shama House?
To adjourn and see whether we go to record the evidence. So, unless somebody assures me that it's a very short break, then we have to adjourn until we have very well to stay. I think you may proceed. You want to press it? Okay.
Thank you. MEC, we were looking at the entry for Shama House and the funds that were transferred to Shama House from the Gauteng Department of Health.
Yes, from this list that I have no reason to doubt what you've presented, that comes from MEC Chrissy. Shama House between 26th August 2016 until the 9th of March 2017 received a total of about 2.9 million rands.
Are you aware, MEC, that Shama House was unlicensed or that they did not have a valid license?
Yes, I'm aware. It's one of those NGOs that were cited.
And it appears from this document that they continue to receive funds from the Department of Health up until March 2017.
It is apparent.
If I could then take you to the entry for Tsepong, which is just on the next page. And my reading of the document is that between the 13th of May 2016 and the 2nd of March 2017, Tsepong Center for People with, and it doesn't complete the name there, but do you see which entry I'm referring to?
Yes, I do.
They received a total of 547,566 rand. Can you confirm that?
Yes, according to this document, it is so.
Are you aware, MEC, that there had been 13 deaths at Tsepong in 2016?
I'm aware that there were deaths in Tsepong. Yes.
I'm not going to take you through each entry of each NGO, MEC, but I have gone through LO 161 against the licenses that are in file 7 of the record. And I found that out of these 20 NGOs, these 20 additional NGOs, only 12 of them have licenses, albeit irregular licenses. The record does not contain licenses for 8 of these NGOs at all. On that,
The proposition is 12 have
12 of them had licenses, although we understand now, Justice, that they were irregular licenses. I have not been able to find licenses for 8 of the entities listed in LO 161.
And the question to the MEC is?
The question to the MEC is, if there were 8 entities that were not licensed at all, why were they receiving payment from the Gauteng Department of Health?
For each case, I can go back and verify, but to the best of my knowledge, those that still had patients during the time of relocation needed to continue having those patients giving food and whatever else during that period before they were closed. But I also see Precious Angels here, because by the time I came to the department, Precious Angels was closed. So I would need to certainly investigate, and all which I find it has been helpful when I uncover possible irregularities. I would ask that it be included in the SIU investigation, because this is the issues of irregularities, possible corruption, as well as the need to repay, those that may need to repay the state, is part of their mandates. Yeah, but I see Precious Angels is here, and by the time I came in, it's one of those that were supposed to be closed. Let me just check the dates here.
As you see, MEC, you can see the date, the 9th of September. From there on, they get paid every month through to February 2017.
Yeah, I see Precious Angels until the 2nd of February, just before I came.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they were shut down, as I understand. They were in the forefront of the ministerial task team
Yes.
quite early, I think. It was somewhere around October. Is that it, Council?
That's correct, Justice.
I think they were shut down around October, but they continued to receive money through to February 2017. I think that's what Council is putting to you.
Yes.
In addition to Precious Angels, MEC, I'd like to draw your attention to evidence we heard from Ms. Dorothy Franks, who came to us from Anchor House, which was operating from Cullinan. She testified that she stopped taking mental health care users into her facility when it was shut down in October 2016, but that she too continued to receive funds until February 2017.
Yeah, I must say that it was a lot of work, effort, and interventions to have full accountability from our Department of Finance. And it was not easy at the beginning, but it is much better now after we had intervened. So it is possible that there were irregularities.
And as we sit here today, MEC, do you acknowledge that it's possible that some payments were made to NGOs to which the NGOs were not entitled?
Yes, I actually also heard or read that one of those that came to give evidence here also invoiced for patients that had already passed away. So indeed, there were those irregularities, and the mandate of the SIU is to follow through those allegations, and also, if, for instance, in this case, ensure that the state is paid back.
And to the extent that there are NGOs that were receiving money and claiming money after they were closed, will the department take legal steps to claim that money back from them?
We are working with the SIU on that matter, most definitely, including those officials who may have had a conflict of interest, who may have been corrupt or fraudulent. The SIU's mandate includes that.
MEC, I'd like to move on now to...
Well, before you do, Council, MEC, I'd like you to look at the same schedule and look at Mosego,
Yes.
home-based care. I don't remember now how many people died there, but I'm sure Advocate Stein can get that information very quickly. They are surely the champions of the lot, isn't it? Look at that total, 13.5 million in less than a year. I mean, ferrying this from the, I don't know if you have the schedule already, MEC.
Yes, I do have it before me.
Mosego home-based care.
Yes.
Look at the payments starting to run from May 2016. So they were paid quite early, it seems to me, as the marathon project was really intensifying. And look at that schedule. They run right through to March 2017. And by quick look at those, you can see that that period is less than a year. It looks more like 10 months. And in 10 months, Mosego home-based care earned 13.5 million.
Yes.
Do you agree with my observation?
Yes.
That seems to be so. And it can be put to you in a moment how many people actually died there. Do we know anything more about this? Because the number is so large in such a short space of time.
What I'm aware, Justice, is that Mosego was operating prior and is one of the NGOs that had excessive numbers. So I think it is quite obvious that they had lots of patients, and that is why they also had deaths registered in the unit. What subsequently has happened with Mosego when they reapplied within the new dispensation is that the number of beds or the number of patients they can take has certainly been reduced.
And why are the monthly payments so irregular? Look at the last one in March, 2.2 million in 1 month, obviously. But look at the whole, look how irregular those amounts are. The 1 month they're entitled to 386. As you can see, the next month, to 386,000. Next month, 248. Few months later, they're entitled to about 3 or 4 times the other monthly amounts. And the final throw just before, in March 2017, then they are paid 2.2 million. Are you aware of a possible explanation? It was before your time, but it's just striking how large amounts were thrown at that NGO.
Yes, the last month there I was in office. Judge, as I indicated at the beginning, it was very difficult to ensure accountability. And also, as I've indicated, one of the recommendations of the health ombuds is to investigate, the NGOs investigate possible corruption and fraud and conflict of interest. So this matter falls within that,
that category.
Yes.
Thank you. Council?
MEC, if I can perhaps just round up that point. I'm looking now at Ella 57.
Of course, ma'am.
And that's a report from the Health Ombud entitled Final Summary on Deceased Life Esidimeni Patients Prepared for the ADR Process. If you could turn to page 8 of that report, please. There is a listing for Mosego and Takalani. It's the third column, the third row. On my calculation, MEC, the number of deaths at this facility at Mosego and Takalani was 38, with 3 deaths occurring in February 2017, 1 occurring in March 2017, and 1 occurring in April 2017.
Yes.
Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Would you like to comment on that further?
The report of the health ombuds were checked with us, and we also confirmed that that was the case. And the report of the health ombuds closes a month after the relocation process ended, which was May. Therefore, it does include the month of June. Yes. If we recall, Mosego Takalani is one of those NGOs that appealed to the tribunal. And the findings of the license, their appeal was upheld in terms of that. But in terms of the report of the health ombuds, their appeal was not upheld.
And the evidence before us, MEC, confirms that as per LO 161,
Yes.
Mosego continued to receive large sums of money until March 2017 from the Gauteng Department of Health, and that in the period February to April 2017, there were 5 deaths at that facility.
Yes, indeed.
I guess the point, MEC, is also that not even all those millions saved the lives of the mental health care users, because 38 of them died in total. I wonder what the excuse would be.
It was clear, if we recall the marathon project, it actually began with Takalani. The experts, stakeholders raised concern about the readiness of Takalani. And indeed, this is evidence that they were not ready for the huge numbers that they received from the Department of Health. I will have to also check the 311, whether the deaths occurred then or they were recorded then. I'll have to get back to that. Yes, but what is very clear, what is on record, what I can validate is that Mosego Takalani is one of the NGOs that were overpopulated. You can actually sense that there could have been a perverse incentive of getting huge numbers beyond their capacity.
And perhaps, MEC, as you raise that, there's a possibility that the money that was being paid over to Mosego and Takalani wasn't translating into healthcare for the patients. It wasn't going directly to them.
Advocate, you see, if you have only 5 beds and you have 20 patients, no amount of money would make the excess patients comfortable and cared for properly until you expand. So that's why I'm saying could have been perverse incentive and put the lives of the patients at risk. All patients, those who could sleep on the beds and those who were overflowing. Sorry. So what is clear is that they had, and that's what was validated by the department when we were reviewing all licenses, that they had excessive number of patients beyond their capacity.
And we heard
where the money went, that is the subject of the SIU, and we certainly need to get to the bottom of it.
We heard earlier in these proceedings, MEC, from Ms. Hannah Jacobus from the Mental Health Directorate, who confirmed that audits were not properly done before patients were moved over to the NGOs, and that the licenses that were issued for the NGOs didn't necessarily reflect their capacity. In the light of what you've just said about overcrowding and resources being able to deliver healthcare services, and in the light of Ms. Jacobus's evidence, is there anything you'd like to add or comment on?
Advocate Stein, as I've indicated, that there is a new licensing framework that the minister has gazetted, that the Department of Health is now utilizing to ensure that the licensing processes are in the best interest of patients, and that there is also compliance. So that dispensation is now operational, and we will continue monitoring it. And we've strengthened the district health system to include psychiatrists in the specialist teams so that the monitoring is continuous. But I don't want to leave out the fact that the Health Ombuds recommendation was that the role of NGOs, and possibly in cahoots with some of the officials, be investigated. So the matter does not end here.
MEC, perhaps before we move on, you've spoken about the role of NGOs. Do you acknowledge that this is in fact a multifaceted issue, and that the role that NGOs play doesn't detract from the role that the department officials and the senior officials in the Department of Health played.
I want to apologize through you,
Yeah.
Justice.
Yes, I wanted to ask the same question. Ms. Stein,
I'll rephrase, Justice.
please do.
We've acknowledged, MEC, that the NGOs had a role to play
Yes.
in the tragedy that's before us. My proposition to you is that the NGOs are not solely to blame. The fact that they played a role does not mean that officials in the department and that senior members also had a role to play in this tragedy.
Most definitely. When you outsource a service, you don't outsource accountability.
I'd like to move on now to the question of the numbers of the deceased. And it's something, again, that's come up quite often in this arbitration. We know from the title of his report, the Ombud also testified that the number of deaths was 94 plus. He said that he is still counting. The current list that's been provided to us stands at 143 people. If you could turn, MEC, to ELA 162 in front of you.
Oh, that one. Okay. Thank you. Yes.
This is the updated SABC report that was provided to the arbitration. Sorry, I'm just looking for a date.
I think it might still be a loose
Oh, yes. It's the one that we
sheet
got
from the
just
South African
before.
Police
Yes.
Services,
Yes.
Doctor.
That report is dated the 24th of January 2018. Do you have it, MEC?
I do.
On the first page, under the heading Status of Investigation, we see that it says, to date, the investigation team can account to 144 deaths. So it seems that the list of 143 may not be the final number. Can you confirm that?
This is an official report from the South African Police Services, and I have no reason to doubt the factual position of those numbers, and indeed it is saying 144. My understanding is that 143 number was presented by the acting head of department, Dr. Kinoshi, and that was the figure that was available and verified up till the end of September 2017. Yes.
In addition to what we see in the SABC report, MEC, I've been through the affidavits that are in the record before you, and it appears that there are 12 names of bereaved family members whose their names do not appear on the list of 143. And perhaps for the record, I should just state who those bereaved family members are.
But let me understand the proposition before you read out names. You're saying over and above the 143, there are 12 mental health care users who passed on who are not included in the 143.
Or the 144, Justice, but yes, that's
144.
correct. That's correct.
That's a startling proposition. Yeah, okay, let's...
Justice, if I could just read the names into the record of those not included on the list.
Even before you do that, how would you have arrived at the new number?
So the new number...
You read them into the record. I just want to understand how you arrive at a proposition that radically alters the number that we have before us.
Justice, Section 27 has provided affidavits from all of its clients who are all bereaved family members who lost their loved ones as a result of the Marathon Project. I've been through those affidavits and compared those affidavits to the list of 143 and noted that 12...
There is the list in the Ombuds supplementary report.
That's correct, Justice.
Yes.
12 of those...
I'm just inquiring after the methodology before we get into
fine,
detailed
Justice.
names. Yeah. Okay.
12 of the deceased mentioned in the affidavits provided by the bereaved families are not included on that list of 143. And my instructions, Justice, I understand I'm not permitted to give evidence, but my instructions are that there is a conversation going on between Section 27 and the government as to the inclusion of those names.
Justice?
Very well. We have to have a little discussion before we put the detail down. And you'll get the opportunity indeed to do that.
I just wanted to raise the concern that before the names could be read into the record, from what my learned friend has said, that like there's been a discussion, those names might need to be verified in order to ensure that they fall within the period that is in question.
Yeah, it's before I even invite Dr. Ramokgopa to respond to this. It's quite late in the day. I think the parties ought to do that verification.
Just
sometime today, for that matter. We've no other day for evidence. But you say to me there are 13 more cold bodies which have not been accounted for up to now. This shoots the number to what? 13 plus 144, that becomes
157.
157. We need to find a proper platform for that radical change of the evidence.
Justice, the affidavits deposed to by the bereaved family members do establish that the deceased passed away within the relevant time period. We understand that, of course, there does need to be a verification, but my proposition to the MEC is simply this, that we still do not know exactly how many people lost their lives.
Well, before you make the proposition, the MEC, make it to me. Are these affidavits which already are part of the record?
That's correct, Justice.
But the tally has been done only now. Is that it?
Justice, my instructions are that our attorneys have been corresponding with the attorneys for the state. There has been some backwards and forwards on these numbers, and that our attorneys have not yet received full feedback on the inclusion of these deceased.
I follow. We'll have to devise a process that gives us certainty. And that process has to be brought to the head, and I'm afraid today. Obviously, you're entitled to put that to the MEC, but I would like to ask the parties to, during an adjournment, to see what they can do, because we're talking really about lives and families at an additional pain, if you like. So if put your proposition to the MEC, and at an appropriate time, we might have to adjourn so that we resolve that matter. And you can imagine the headlines that would come out of that. 143 has sprung to 157. So what do you want to do now? Do you want to adjourn and do the verification process, or do you want to continue with your questions now?
Justice, if I could just take instructions from my attorney as to where the process stands.
Yes.
Justice, my instructions are to request a brief adjournment to allow the attorneys to talk about this. I'm instructed that the relevant details have been provided to the attorneys for the state, and so they're perhaps in a position to advise us how long they need to adjourn for.
Mr. Utama, Advocate Utama, what light can you shed on all this?
Justice, I am made to understand that that process of verification is underway. It is a matter which requires time. I'm not able to give an estimation. I'll have to take proper instructions as to how long will it take to do that verification. If my learned friend requires an adjournment for that purpose, we should be able to get an indication is it a matter that can be resolved now and we move on, or will it require more time? I should, however, caution that my learned friend should not be quick to mention those names into the record until verification has been made.
Do you know what the verification process would entail?
Justice will recall that when the number had increased, the assistance of the Office of the Ombud was actually of assistance in that regard. So this cannot only be decided on the affidavit that my learned friend is making reference to. So like it requires a proper investigation in order to ensure that those people fall within the relevant period.
Is there agreement that is there an agreement that the people referred to are in fact deceased? Is that common cause?
That appears to be common cause, but the concern is whether do they fall within the relevant period.
I.e., were they at life Esidimeni at the time the project was initiated? Is that it?
Indeed so.
So the debate is not whether or not people died. It is whether or not they died in circumstances covered by the arbitration agreement.
That's correct, Justice.
Justice, if I could perhaps say one more thing, and that is I'd just like to correct that the information has not been sprung on our colleagues just this afternoon. I'm instructed that our attorney sent the initial list to the attorneys for the government on the 7th of December 2017 and has followed up since then and has still received no feedback. And so this is certainly not the first time that they're hearing about these additional deceased.
MEC, before I adjourn, you've had the exchanges. Is there any light you want to shed on this?
Justice, what I can say at this point in time is that one death is one death too many. And that if indeed there are deaths that were during this period and are validated and verified to have been during this period as a result of the Gauteng Mental Marathon project, indeed it would be appropriate to acknowledge that. If it has happened and we haven't acknowledged that, it is also a secondary trauma as well to the affected. So I think due process needs to be dealt with as speedily as possible so that we can get to the bottom of the numbers. I just want to refer you, Justice and councils, to ELA 163, which was shared with us just before we adjourned. If you look at, just as an example of sometimes why we say let's validate, let's verify. If you look at the first patient, and please allow me not to pronounce names for confidentiality's sake, MA1768. You'll see the name, the surname, and I mean the first name is 2 there. and the surname is on its own. And you go to second page, number 49, which is MA 1510. All those three names are there, but in different columns. But you look at the date of birth, it is the same. So I'm just saying that whenever we receive any data, any names, we respectfully request that due process, which does not only involve us, should also involve Home Affairs and whichever other agency, including the police. We should subject ourselves to that process so that we indeed have validated data.
Yes, you say there's lots of room for error, and therefore it's important to validate and check backwards and forwards. But I see the point. I can see the same name just spun around. Will an adjournment facilitate that verification?
Justice, it appears that it will not be practicable to finalize that process, as there are other government institutions that need to be contacted. And I had earlier submitted that it is indeed correct that there's been correspondence between the attorneys, but that process of verification was underway. From what the witness has just said is that, like, other government institutions will have to be brought in to assist to do that verification.
But is it so that this correspondence has been going on from December 2017?
That is my instruction, that there has been an exchange from that period.
And why haven't we had this verification done until this afternoon?
Justice, I'll have to get a proper report as to how far they have managed to get with regard to that process.
Having heard all the parties, would the rest of the council want to say anything before we adjourn? Advocate Krause.
Thank you, Justice. This is news for us. I don't have anything to add to this debate, but it's something that must be resolved speedily, in my opinion.
Advocate Yena.
Thank you, Justice. We are also not in receipt of the list. We have no objection to the adjournment.
You are not in receipt of the list which Ms. Stein is referring to?
We are
not
aware of the list, yes.
Yes. Advocate Groenewald.
Thank you, Justice. It's also news to us, but if we can resolve it quickly and find a solution, then be it so. If there's more people that died who's not on the list, we should verify that, clarify that, and include them. And the only issue is the time constraints, and see how we deal with that. But if there's an agreement between the parties, as long as we can sort it out before argument by next week, yeah.
Obviously, the question of due notice becomes then important. Advocate Stein?
Yes, Justice. I would have to take further instructions on who was copied on the correspondence. My understanding is that the correspondence was simply between Section 27's attorneys and the attorneys for the state.
I understand you, not all of you, coming to me prematurely. That I understand entirely. What council can resolve, I need not be involved. You've all involved me. So I think we're going to adjourn, and you must enter into a huddle. And let's avoid what the MEC rightly calls secondary victimization. You were dead in, you were dead out. Because we seem to be dealing with people who have passed on, who've lost their lives.
Certainly, Justice.
So I'm going to adjourn, and I need to be told after an initial consultation what kind of time should I expect to be waiting, and thereafter we should come back and proceed. I don't think we have another day for evidence. We all have ordered our lives around these dates, so we have to conclude this today. Very well. I'm adjourned, and I'll be informed when to come back.